There are indeed some difficult stages in life. For example, when your parents need some medical help or just need help through their daily lives. How do you have that conversation? What's available to you? What do you need to know? My next speaker, guest, has some answers to those questions.
Building spirituality, family, health, and business. This is The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.
Hey, Giant Builders. Welcome. Thank you for joining. I want to make sure you know that we've added 2 things to our website, so please check them out. We now have the giantbuilders.com media. So speakers that we've had in the past or will have in the future, they have a book, will be posted there. So you can check out their books. And it also links to where you can buy their books and their actual recording on the podcast. So if you want to go back and check it out, review, whatever, it's there. Secondly, we have a new sponsors page. Yay! Moving up in the world. So that is the giantbuilders.com sponsors. So please check out the people who are assisting us with bringing you such great guests. And today, we do have a great guest, and I was telling her that I was looking forward to talking to her because I have, my mother is 81, and I'm sure that this is a process that's going to be facing me. And also, I mean, what happens when we are in position. So Nancy May is our guest today. Hi, Nancy. How are you?
Terrific, Lois. How are you? It's
I'm
great to be here with you and
Thanks.
everybody else who's listening in.
Well, I appreciate it. Can you tell our listeners what you do?
Sure. I work with individuals and families and even companies who are dealing with the process of helping themselves, friends, family members, or employees who are caring for aging parents and just don't know what to do and want to make sure that we all get through this physically, emotionally, and financially sound, because it's a big hurdle. And when we get that call, it's mom's fallen, dad's fallen, something's happened.
Mm.
It's not a part of life that we are typically practiced and prepared for.
Yeah, my husband and I were talking about this. His aunt fell. And,
Yep.
It's just like, it just seems like it's a process now because, you think of the Waltons and grandma and grandpa lived there and everybody was just,
Good night, John
there.
boy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, just life just seemed, appeared like it was a little bit easier to process the growing older age. So tell me, how did you get into this area of professionalism?
So I got into this. My background is working with public companies and boards of directors and CEOs, some very big names. And as I like to use humor in all of this, because I think it makes it easier for all of us, is that I went from the boardroom or have gone from the boardroom to the emergency room. And originally, things happened. It's like I said, it's not something that we're prepared for, even if we're medical professionals. And I find that the ones that fall the hardest in many cases are doctors and nurses and others who are in the profession of caring or wanting to care. And every possible bump or mound or hurdle that could possibly happen with my folks happened to us too, including the cost of their care growing to $30,000 a month, over $360,000 a year,
Wow.
which I very quickly learned is not unusual.
Oh, wow, really?
Not unusual. No, in fact, I just spoke with somebody the other day who said their mom's care had gone to 25,000 and they were expecting it to get higher and they wanted to know what to do.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, wow.
So as if anybody who've ever heard or seen the old movie Network, I think it was in the 60s or 70s before I was really paying attention at that time. And there was a guy in the advertising industry who opened up the window and yelled out the window and said, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore." And everybody in the city of New York was doing the same thing. And you could hear this, and it became a bit of a cult. Every now and then the movie would air again, and you'd hear, "I'm mad as hell, I'm not taking it anymore." Well, that became my mantra
Oh
very early
yeah.
on, taking care of my folks. And knowing that I would eventually, at some point in my life, take over as their durable power of attorney, because it was something that my folks prepared me for and asked for my help. But when this, hit the fan, it was, literally a come to like smack between the eyes reality. And I sat down my dad with and said, "Listen, Dad, if you and Mom expect to live beyond the next 6 months, let's have a serious discussion about this. Like, I don't want you to leave before you have to." So it was my charge to make sure that the mess was unraveled. And I did, in learning about the entire process of the aging care industry. And now I also advise those of us who are going through this stage, again, so that we don't become broken ourselves, because it happens very quickly to us as well.
I think part of it is that we don't realize that we're getting older. It's just like I kind of feel like I'm 61, but inside I feel like I'm like 32. So like,
Well, 60 is the new 30, as they say, right?
oh, there we go. That's
I
my
think those are
situation.
people who are over 60 who are starting to say that.
So I like my mom. I don't think she comprehends or accepts
Oh,
the fact that she's 81, and she worked at a nursing home
she
younger
knows.
years, and she's like, I don't want to go in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you get to a point, what do we do? So like, where do you start people out?
Well, the best thing to do is start at the beginning, but we don't always start there. It's typically we'll start somewhere in the middle. I say there are sort of 5 stages of caring for somebody that you love. The beginning, when you kind of think something's going to happen, but you're not sure when. So that's a good time to have the conversation with yourself, a spouse, a partner. And ideally, you should be having these conversations with your family well over the course of time. So you don't have to sit down and say, "Oh God, it's like pulling a tooth. We have to have this, the death and dying conversation." Well, it's not about death and dying. It's
Mhm.
about living well and making every single day count, not just for you, but for those that you're caring, that care for you too, or care about you. So, I mean, ideally, this should be a lifelong conversation. But if that's not your case, start whenever you can. Who is going to be taking over when you can't do it yourself, or who are you going to partner with, so you can have those discussions in an honest and open way and say, "This is what I want. This is what I don't want. What's going to make life easy for you as the person I'm relying on." And if you can't make those decisions for yourself at some point, and there's a cognitive impairment, again, who's going to do that you trust?
Mhm.
But it's just as important for somebody else who's taking care of you or taking over as a durable power of attorney or some sort of guardian, to have those discussions with themselves and their own business partners or life partners and spouses, and say, "What happens if I don't want to do this anymore? And I can't do it because I'm ill, or I'm exhausted, or my career won't allow me to do so." Because over 40% of us quit our jobs to take care of a spouse, which ends up being, I mean, statistically, they say that amounts to, almost $400,000 in the course of a lifetime career, which isn't made up, because you can't do that. So these are real questions that college and outside planners don't tell us about. And even if they are telling us, it's might be for some other purposes other than our personal benefits.
All right. So what how do we explore the option when our parents are at a stage where either they can't be on their own anymore, or maybe we can't take care of them ourselves?
Well, it depends upon what kind of options we want to talk about. If we're talking about going to a care facility, that's one option, and it's not always a nursing home. And understanding what you're signing. So one of the things I do is as I go over care contracts so people really understand what they're buying into, and they don't get hit with the 20, 30, 40, 50, $100,000 a month. And I haven't seen 100,000, but I have seen up to $50,000 a month
Oh my.
for care costs. And for not great quality care. That's ridiculous. Plus, you could be one fellow I heard about recently through a friend who said, Joe put $1 million down on these continued care facilities. Now he's paying the monthly fee. And he said, yeah, and it's getting worse. And he says, yeah. And guess what? He got COVID and he died 3 months after he got there with his wife. And now she's alone and not understanding what they've bought into.
Mm.
So there's everything's negotiable.
Yeah, excuse me.
So that's one thing. The other is most people don't want to go there. 80% of people, our family members, don't want to go into anything like that. They want to stay at home, which is also fine. We took our parents out and bought a house, and they had their care there. And I did this from 1,200 miles away, so it is doable. But you have to really understand what kind of life you're trying to create for somebody. And if they're in their home by themselves at some point is not going to be doable, but you're going to need to bring in support. And what kind of support do you need? What kind of stage are they in? How much additional outside guidance? I say that taking care of an aging parent, whether it be in a care facility or in their own home or your home, is like running a small, highly complex enterprise.
Mm.
It's a small business.
Yeah.
It's a business, I say, again, using a little tongue in cheek, Mom and Dad Inc. And, the goal is to make sure your customers, mom and dad, are safe, and your siblings, and who else is invested in this. And that sounds a little cold, but in this business of making sure they do well and you do well too.
I think I see more family arguments over this stage than in other stages of life.
There's a lot of it, and some people have said that they do, co-POA and whatnot. And I say to parents, like, no, one person should be in charge, just like, going back to the CEO model. Have you ever seen a public company where co-CEOs work out really well? No.
No.
Right. The buck's got to stop somewhere, but that should stop with a person who knows your wishes, what you want, and will fight to make sure that happens no matter what. I say fight in quotes. And understanding the relationships that you have with, if we're talking about a parent, with your other kids, and who really has that ability to be firm when you need to be, and empathetic and a little more gentle when that's also needed. And sometimes it takes a lot of diplomacy. And other times, the CEO doesn't need to tell, this sounds terrible, but the janitor how they put the key in the lock and turn the door and open the door every day.
I love that.
Right?
Yeah. All right. So how do we start the conversation? Let's say, okay, so I'm 61. How do I start that conversation with my kids?
So I would just, say, have we ever discussed, what you want and what I want? Because there's no telling that they could go before you and you may not know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just have a conversation one day over dinner. And if you haven't done this over the course of your lifetime, my parents, I again, a little bit of humor. I joked and I said, my mom and dad prepared me for their death since I was 5. And I was the oldest of 3 siblings, and one passed when she was very young, with childhood leukemia. So, they couldn't cure that in those days, that day and age. And then my youngest, the baby sister at the time, was my little sister. So if anything happened in the course of life to my parents, I was the oldest child. They kind of expected me to take over. So they made sure that I knew how to dial 911 for the doctor, and how to jump out of the 2nd-story window and not get hurt with a fire ladder, and take care of my younger sister if I needed to, and where we would go if anything happened to them. So those were the conversations that we had. But if you haven't had those conversations, start now. Say, listen, Sally, or listen, Lois, here's what I want for me. but here's also what I want for you as my child. And if you're willing to take over, should I not be able to do so myself? Can you do this? Let's talk about it. And if not, that's okay. It's not your responsibility. Let's figure out how we're going to get this done so that you don't sweat the small stuff too. And don't do it all at once unless you have a really big bottle of wine. Or maybe something stronger.
Or 2 bottles.
But do it in chunks. Just, let's continue the conversation. It's like, hard discussions happen in small bites, right?
Right. Yeah. All right. So how do we find proper care for our aging parents? What do we look for?
So if you're hiring an aide independently or a group of aides independently, which is what we did, we worked both in agency at one point. I fired the agency and then I ended up with independent aides that I hired. But if you have an agency, you want to interview the agency for being able to know what they can do, if anything, if what hits the fan, as well as being able to interview and get to know the individual aides that they are bringing into your home. Mm-hmm. And just because they say they do background checks doesn't mean that they do full background checks. And stuff happens, which it did, with an aide through an agency that we had. And some of them won't allow that. So if that's not going to happen, then, next. I learned it's sort of like Donald Trump at The Apprentice, not being politics. Oh, yeah. You learn to say, you're fired really fast. So in the business world, they say the old adage is you hire slow and you fire fast. I say in the care world, you hire fast because you need them and you fire fast because you need to. And you learn to sort of like get rid of that pain of like, it hurts. It's still going to hurt when you want to get rid of somebody. But if you're hiring independently, a CNA is helpful, certified nursing assistant advisor. There are certifications for that. It doesn't take a lot to get. I think it's like 12 hours or maybe it's 20 hours now. It's like, how do you measure urine? How do you take blood pressure? It's like, it's not rocket science and you don't necessarily need to be that. I would rather have somebody who has had the experience of caring for somebody that they love and done really well and has the ability to be sensitive, empathetic, really listen and know who it is they're taking care of and have a bond with that person that they would take care of them just like they'd want to be taking care of themselves. Mm-hmm. So you can train for skill. You can't train for attitude.
Yeah. Right? Or for heart.
You can't. Yeah. Either you have it or you don't.
Right. So I've heard terrible horror stories with nursing homes.
Yeah, it happens. There's an average of for every resident, meaning our parents, one parent, two parents, right? There's anywhere between 15 parents or residents to one aide. It can be 20 or 30. So if you can imagine, if you've got one person taking care of 20 people, 17 to 20 people, somebody, Aunt Sally down the hall falls and can't get up or needs to go to the bathroom. They may not even know that, or they could be sitting in their own feces for hours at a time. Mm-hmm. And you don't want that.
So what do we do, or how do we, if we're at a point where they say need to go to a nursing home or something like that, how do we work through that process?
Finding the nursing home or the care facility?
Yeah.
So first, you got to get really educated on the types of care facilities that are out there. There are a lot, and how they're structured, and even understanding who owns it. So I'll give you one example. I do this occasionally. I do this, what I call secret shopping of care facilities. I joke and I say, I'd much prefer to be a secret shopper at Nordstrom's, but I have done it on care facilities and how people get sold into this. quite frequently we're sold into a facility because it's beautiful. They have a high pressure sales team saying that, well, we only have one bed left, and if you can't make your decision by Tuesday, it's going to somebody else. That is butkus, unless you are a Medicaid patient, and that's a whole nother story, and then probably for another discussion.
Okay.
But understand that they sell care facilities, they meaning these corporations, these institutions, like it's the Four Seasons. It's not the Four Seasons. And most of them, unless it is actually a medical facility, a nursing home or rehab facility under a medical umbrella, it is not a medical facility. We think they are, but it's not. So you have to understand what's out there. One of the care facilities that I looked at was actually a former timeshare facility place. And they said, well, if you sign up for more than 6 months, we don't have to charge you the hotel fee. And I said, hotel fee, like hotel tax and everything else. Like, why? Well, we're technically under the business umbrella, still a timeshare. So hence that was that. So there's a lot that goes into understanding what's happening, and even understanding how, like I said earlier, the contracts work, because you're going in at, let's say, independent care, doesn't mean that the contract's not going to change without you knowing, as you go to assisted or to memory or to nursing, and the list goes on. So really getting the support that you need, and anything that you're signing up for, to say, I'm going to mention a name, like a place for mom, you dial the number, and then all of a sudden you type in your name and your phone number, and you get 20 calls from 20 different places calling you. Like, well, I understand Aunt Sally needs to go to someplace. Like, those places are getting commissions, although it's free. The facility is their customer. You are not their customer. So you really want to make sure that whoever you're working with is not getting incentivized by the facility, that they really have your best interest at heart and help you make that decision in knowing what to look for, what to smell for, how to ask questions, what you can and can't negotiate, how the little sneaky clauses get in there that end up relinquishing your POA responsibilities, and they become the POA. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Is there an advantage to hiring a facility that has, like, sorry, I can't think of how.
Multiple levels of care?
Yes, that's great. Yeah. So
Right.
like you put them in here and eventually they end up in memory care or something like that. Is there an advantage to finding something that goes to
Well,
all
it's
levels?
easier for you, the family
Yeah.
member.
Mhm.
But other than that, I would say not necessarily, because the type of, I'll put in quotes, care that they may be getting at independent or oversight is going to be very different than they're going to get in memory care. It may not be the same person.
Mm.
And understanding also in memory care is also not classified under a medical category. It's, people are sitting around. Some of them, many facilities will do, I see, pharmaceutical restraints,
Mm.
meaning that they're drugged
Okay.
and sitting there because it's easier to take care of somebody who's somewhat comatose, even if they are have some sort of dementia or cognitive capabilities or incapabilities.
Mm.
Just because somebody can't remember their name or remember who you are doesn't mean that they're incapable of feeling and having a conversation and connecting with somebody.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
It's hard. It's very
yeah.
it's very hard. Yeah.
I'm guessing this changes constantly. How do you help people stay in or understand the changes or keep them updated?
From a facility, if they're in a facility or at
No,
home.
just like as an advisor.
Well, it really comes down to the individual and checking what's going in. So with our situation, my mom had dementia, and it came on. We usually don't know when it's happening. You kind of have an idea, but we all want to be in a certain state of denial about memory changes, right?
Right.
And there you can have there's actually over 100 different forms of cognitive impairment. So
Mm.
there's a lot that goes on there. And just because somebody has Alzheimer's may not mean that they don't remember who you are. I mean, it's just really interesting to see the changes and the subtleties in different types of diseases of the brain. But the best way to figure out what's happening and changing is to have the conversation with that person that's going on, to watch, to monitor, to see little subtleties that are happening. And if they're at home with another parent or a partner or whoever that might be, or with an aide, in our case it was an aide, I was in constant contact with our lead aide. We had 6 to 8, depending upon what our schedules were going. And that worked for us because it didn't put the burden on any one person. If you're hiring aides independently or even through an agency, I highly recommend never relying on just one or two, ever.
Okay.
Because you never know when something's going to happen to one. And to put that responsibility on somebody else is very difficult. And other people have life besides you. Surprise, surprise. But I say if you've got independent aides or not, you may have a team like we did, but you should always be looking for another one because things change in people's lives and attitudes change. And sometimes it's just, even with the change in the personality of your parents, the fit may need to be adjusted over time. So
Oh,
but staying
okay.
in contact with your aides, my lead aide and I stayed in contact all the time. We were on the phone several times a week, sometimes twice a day. And when just quick check-in, see what's going on. And they would say, hey, something's happening here. What's happening? Text messages. It becomes, I wouldn't say an obsession, but if you're not there, like I wasn't 1,200 miles away and my sister was just as long, if not further, it's getting in sync with what's happening and trusting the team that you've got to make sure that they're doing the best that they can do for you and for those that you love.
Tell me about your podcast.
So my podcast is Elder Care Success. You can find it on any podcast platform. And we're hitting up, well, when this comes out, we'll already have 100 episodes out.
Cool.
So it's been around for a little while. And there we talk about all sorts of issues from different types of dementia to, I had a show, I'll do a series of these shows with a gentleman who is an entrepreneur, business owner, and has the diagnosis of Lewy body dementia. So to talk with him as the patient and the business owner and what's that like for him and his family, and watching and experience that progression go on. So he's a very open and, I would say, honest and brave fellow for sharing that.
Oh, yeah.
Including Parkinson's, which is different, heart and cardiac issues, just general caregiving questions and issues that might be going on. You name it. It is totally open. And for the 100th episode, I'm doing a show with a psychic to see if we can channel mom and dad back.
Oh.
We're gonna have a little fun with that one.
Okay.
So.
Well, any closing thoughts?
Well, the other thing is just, I've got a book called How to Survive 911 Medical Emergencies, step-by-step guide, before, during, and after. You can get that on Amazon. It's 5-star rated. And that just takes you through the process of being prepared for an emergency should it happen to you and your family. And the one thing you're going to be doing more than you ever have done before in your life in caring for an aging parent is you will likely be calling 911 at least more than once. And that's okay. But knowing what to do so that they get better care. And like I said, you keep your head and your heart together, and when to say enough is enough is okay too. So, and in that we even share how to call 911 when the 911 system is down, and it does go down.
Oh, okay.
The step-by-step guide, what to do, how to do it, how to get discharged, how to get better help, how to get better support in the hospital when you need it, and how to make the decisions of facilities if you do need to go to one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to have a link to your book in our new media section.
Thank you.
Links to your other things in the below this episode. And in fact, we're going to give away one of your books.
Oh, thank you. And we have a
So,
podcast. Well, we have the podcast, but we also have a YouTube channel.
oh, okay.
So
All right.
that's fairly new. And this is you and I are recording it on the day before Halloween, but there's some fun holiday episodes in that one that you're going to
Oh, okay.
enjoy as well. So
All right.
I'll have to do something for Valentine's Day.
So, listeners, leave a message below our YouTube episode of this recording. What did you find most helpful? What do you think is the conversation you're going to have with your parents or your children? So, and then we'll have a drawing and give away a book.
And you can
So,
do this. You can do it. You can do it well for yourself and for those that you love. You really can.
yeah. Well, Nancy, thank you so much. This has really opened my eyes to just understanding the options that are available.
And it doesn't have to be a scary conversation.
Yeah.
If you haven't talked about it with your mom, just say, "Hey, mom, have you thought about this?" And I'm not here to off you today.
Yeah.
Because I might go first. So mom, if here's what I want too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Have those
Oh, good point.
discussions. You never know
Yeah.
when our time is up, but
Yeah.
not to be morbid about it.
All right. Yeah. All right. Well, Giant Builders, we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.